Question 456. In 1968, the United States Supreme Court decided a case regarding fair and open housing, which upheld the Civil Rights Act passed by Congress in A. 1964, B. 1941, C. 1866, D. 1850. Correct answer is A. 1964. Civil Rights Act of 1866 passed shortly after the Civil War, prohibited racial discrimination in property rights. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed by Congress on July 2, 1964, and signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson shortly after. The act is considered a landmark civil rights and labor law in the United States, and is considered one of the most significant legislative achievements in American history. The act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. In the 1968 case, Jones v. Mayer, the court held that federal law bars all racial discrimination, private or public, in the sale or rental of real property. Jones v. Alfred H. Mayer Company, 1968. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that the 1866 Act barred all racial discrimination in the sale or rental of property, whether private or public. Therefore, while the 1964 Act is significant, the 1866 Act was the specific law upheld in the 1968 Jones v. Mayer ruling. Question 457. Private restrictions on land use may be established by A. Written agreement, B. Private land use controls, C. Subdivision general plan restrictions, D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. Written agreement could be in the form of a servitude agreement between two or more property owners, where one property benefits from a limitation placed on the other property's use. For example, a servitude might grant an easement for access across a neighboring property. Private land use controls can be established through restrictive covenants, which are limitations on property use written into deeds or other property documents. Restrictive covenants are often used in subdivisions to maintain consistency and property values. For example, a covenant might specify minimum square footage requirements for new homes in the subdivision. Subdivision general plan restrictions. While general plans are typically public documents outlining development goals for a broader area, some subdivisions might have their own internal general plan that sets forth restrictions specific to the subdivision. These restrictions could be considered a form of private land use control. Question 458. The kind of mortgage requiring no loan payments by the owners while remaining in the house is called an A. Reverse mortgage, B. Live-in loan, C. ARM, D. No such mortgage exists. Payments must continue to be made throughout the life of a loan. Correct answer is A. Reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgage. A reverse mortgage allows homeowners aged 62 or older to convert a portion of their home equity into cash. Unlike a traditional mortgage, the borrower does not make monthly payments. Instead, the loan balance increases over time as interest and fees accrue. The loan is typically repaid when the homeowner sells the home, moves out, or passes away. Question 459. If the president of a corporation signs a listing agreement on behalf of the corporation with a broker, and the president dies a month later before a property is procured, the listing is A. Invalidated, B. Suspended until a new president is chosen, C. Valid, D. Voidable. Correct answer is C. Valid. A corporation is a separate legal entity, distinct from its individual officers or shareholders. Contracts entered into by the corporation, through its authorized representatives, remain valid even if those individuals change. The listing agreement is between the broker and the corporation, not the individual president. Therefore, the president's death does not invalidate the agreement. The corporation might need to appoint a new representative to handle the sale. The corporation's obligations under the listing agreement continue unless other conditions for termination are met, e.g., expiration of the listing period, mutual agreement to cancel. Question 460. Taxpayers can exclude up to $250,000 of the gain on the sale of their principal residence if they can meet the following requirements. A. Owned the home for at least 2 years. B. Lived in the home as their main home for at least 2 years. C. During the 2-year period ending on the date of the sale, did not exclude gain from the sale of another home. D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. To qualify for the capital gains exclusion on the sale of a principal residence, taxpayers must meet all of the following requirements. 1. Owned the home for at least 2 years. The taxpayer must have owned the property for at least 24 months. 2. Lived in the home as their main home for at least 2 years. The property must have been the taxpayer's main residence for at least 24 months during the 5-year period ending on the sale date. 3. During the 2-year period ending on the date of the sale, did not exclude gain from the sale of another home. The taxpayer cannot have used the capital gains exclusion on another property sale within the 2-year period before selling their current principal residence. Question 461. Private mortgage insurance, PMI, is usually required for conventional loans with down payments of A. Less than 20%, B. Less than 35%, C. Less than 40%, D. PMI is required for all conventional loans. Correct answer is A. Less than 20%. Private mortgage insurance, PMI, is typically required by lenders on conventional mortgage loans when the borrower makes a down payment of less than 20% of the home's purchase price. This is because a lower down payment is seen as a higher risk for the lender. PMI protects the lender if the borrower defaults on the loan. Once the borrower's equity in the home reaches 20%, meaning they own 20% of the home's value, they usually have the right to request that the PMI be removed. In some cases, the PMI may be automatically terminated once the loan balance reaches 78% of the original loan amount. Question 462. If a purchaser believes his written purchase agreement has been breached by the seller, it is necessary to sue for breach within A. 1 year, B. 4 years, C. 7 years, D. There is no deadline to sue. Correct answer is B. 4 years. In California, the statute of limitations for bringing a lawsuit for breach of a written contract is generally 4 years from the date of the breach. This is governed by California Code of Civil Procedure Section 337. Therefore, if a purchaser believes their written purchase agreement has been breached by the seller, they typically have 4 years from the date the breach occurred to file a lawsuit. Failing to do so within this timeframe could bar them from seeking legal remedies for the breach. Question 463. In order for someone to be released from liability for payment of a trust deed and a note, he must find a buyer who will A. Take title to the trust deed, as is, B. Pay cash for the trust deed, C. Assume the trust deed and note liability, D. Execute a release agreement for the trust deed and note. Correct answer is C. Assume the trust deed and note liability. While other actions occur during a property transfer, they don't inherently release the original borrower from their loan obligations. Simply taking title, as is, pertains to the property's physical condition and doesn't address the existing financing. Paying cash for the property would certainly satisfy the existing trust deed and note, releasing the seller, but the question focuses on a buyer taking over the existing debt. Although a separate release agreement can free the original borrower from their loan obligations, it typically occurs after and depends on the buyer formally assuming the loan. Therefore, the buyer's assumption of the loan liability is the primary and essential step in transferring that financial responsibility. Therefore, the most effective way for a seller to be released from the liability of a trust deed and note is to find a buyer who will legally assume those obligations, subject to the lender's approval. This transfer of liability, where the buyer becomes the primary debtor, is the key to potentially freeing the original borrower from their ongoing financial responsibilities associated with the loan. Question 464. In order to be valid, the following agreements would be required by the statute of frauds to be in writing, except A. An agreement to sell a parcel of land, B. 2 real estate brokers' agreement to split a commission for the sale of their co-listed property, C. A tenant's 2-year lease for an apartment, D. An agreement authorizing a broker to earn a commission for procuring a buyer for a client's home. Correct answer is B. 2 real estate brokers' agreement to split a commission for the sale of their co-listed property. The statute of frauds generally applies to contracts for the sale of real estate and agreements authorizing brokers to earn commissions for selling real estate. However, agreements between brokers regarding commission splits are usually not covered by the statute of frauds. The statute of frauds generally requires certain types of contracts to be in writing to be enforceable. These typically include agreements for the sale of real property, A. This is a classic example covered by the statute of frauds. Leases for a period exceeding 1 year, C. A 2-year lease falls under this requirement in most jurisdictions, including California. Agreements authorizing an agent to sell real estate for a commission, D. In many states, including California, an agreement to pay a real estate broker a commission needs to be in writing to be enforceable. However, an agreement between 2 brokers to share a commission is generally considered an agreement between agents, not directly involving the transfer of an interest in real property or a lease exceeding 1 year. While it's good business practice to have such agreements in writing, they are often not strictly mandated by the statute of frauds. Therefore, the broker's commission splitting agreement is the exception. Question 465. Sandra owned a lot with an appurtenant easement across Jerry's property. If Sandra sells her property to Ellen, without mentioning the easement in the deed of conveyance, the easement A. passed to Ellen, the new owner, B. went with Sandra, the old owner, C. reverted to Jerry, owner of the servient tenement, D. either A or C, at the discretion of the county recorder. Correct answer is A. passed to Ellen, the new owner. An appurtenant easement is a legal right that allows someone to use another person's property for a specific purpose, and is attached to the land it benefits. It's a type of easement that involves 2 adjacent properties, known as the dominant estate and the servient estate. When Sandra sells his property, dominant tenement, the easement appurtenant automatically transfers to the new owner, Ellen. She inherits the rights granted by the easement, such as access or use of Jerry's property, servient tenement. If it had instead been an easement in gross belonging to Jerry, or personal easement, the benefit would indeed have ended with the sale of Jerry's property to a new owner.